For many of us, it can be hard to leave work completely at the office. A friend may need financial advice or help with their plumbing, and your professional life makes you the best person for the job. It's usually able to be scheduled for a later date, a slow weekend or lazy Sunday, but not all professionals get this flexibility. For doctors, having to work outside the office usually means an emergency situation that could be the difference between life and death. Dr. Paulo Alves was already working for an airline in Brazil when he experienced his first in-flight event.
I was going to Geneva for a meeting, and then this gentleman, in the middle of the flight, started bleeding profusely from the nose. They came right to my shoulder and woke me up. And then he was only speaking German, and of course I have difficulty in understanding. I just saw that it was a significant amount of blood. And then he said, tumor, which I believe that in German is also tumor, right? So that's very bad news.
Alves is a trained cardiologist, not an expert in cancer treatment. So while nosebleeds are common on flights due to the dry air, it could be a very different meaning if the tumor was causing it. He managed to stop the bleeding and advised that they divert the plane, but the family refused. The plane made it to Geneva and everyone went their separate ways. For Alves, this would be the first of more than 20 in-flight medical events he'll help with. Though for a time it felt like he was getting paged to help a fellow passenger on every other flight he took, Alves says medical events are fairly infrequent given the sheer number of people flying at one time.
As we're speaking right now, there are around between 1.5 to 2 million people flying. So this is a suspended city, right? So now if you see the number of cases that are happening, medical cases, they are actually a very small fraction of those traveling.
But a small fraction is still a lot of lives. Alves recently published a paper looking at data from 2022 and 2023. It found that in-flight medical events occur about once every 212 flights globally. With more than 3 billion people flying in 2022, that's thousands of passengers having some health issue in the sky. And since there's no way to call an ambulance from 30,000 feet in the air, the cabin crew are trained to help in emergency situations. But as you can imagine, their options are limited.
So they are specifically trained in first aid, meaning bleeding, some ice application, minor trauma, things like that, wound care. And on the other extreme of that, AED and CPR. The resources that we have on board are aimed to stabilize the situation. And then if it is good enough for the remainder of the flight, and if not, then you need to recommend a diversion.
The Federal Aviation Administration mandates certain medical supplies, like first aid kits, are on all U.S. aircrafts, and that the cabin crew are trained for medical emergencies. In fact, Alves played a prominent role in introducing programs in Latin America that are now considered best practices, like having automated external defibrillators on board each flight. Now, he's the Global Medical Director of Aviation Health for MedAir, which provides medical, security, and travel safety support. And though Alves is no stranger to helping during an in-flight emergency, he says he actually shouldn't be the first option.
This situation of calling for a medical volunteer, this is an improvised solution for a problem, right? Because if you think there is a problem, really you are counting on a volunteer to help or not? How often there is a volunteer? If I tell you, okay, there is, in our experience, there is 80% of the times you have a volunteer. Right. So if I sell to you, let's say, whatever, product that works 80% of the time, I say, come on, I don't want that. I want something that works 100% of the time.
And even with that 80%, you don't get to choose which type of medical professional will volunteer.
It could be not ideal in a few cases because it could be, with all due respect, could be a dermatologist, could be a psychiatrist, with all due respect to my wife, could be, a pathologist. So who's in charge of this situation? How comfortable they are?
Which is why contacting ground-based medical support, or BGMs, has been adopted as a best practice by most airlines. There are a few different models, but many rely on a third party to provide highly trained emergency physicians who have a specific knowledge of aviation medicine.
So they have an understanding about the impact of the environment into the situation, but again, with a very good foundation in emergency medicine. Because this is what you need to do. Emergency medicine, this is exactly the mindset.
They're not working to treat the underlying condition. Instead, aviation medicine is all about stabilizing the passenger until they can get to the appropriate doctor. And though it doesn't happen often, if they need to divert the plane, the ground-based medical support team is equipped to make that call free of bias. Alves says that's an important distinction from simply relying on a medical volunteer. While that person is a medical professional, they're also a passenger who has a strong personal preference for getting to their destination, which could influence their decision to divert.
Not always a diversion is the best interest of the medical volunteer, because that could ruin their vacation or conference or meeting or whatever. Why so? Because primarily they are just another passenger.
Even Alves, a world-renowned expert in aviation medicine, has felt this dilemma, especially during his first volunteering experience on the way to a conference in Geneva.
At some point, I thought I will divert the flight. However, if I divert my flight, I'm going to miss my connection. I'm going to miss my meeting. That was the only reason for my travel. So just to put in perspective how uncomfortable the situation is for a medical volunteer, because we are caught off guard. We are not in our hospital, we don't have our nurses to help us.
Which is why having a ground-based medical support member making that call is so important. And thankfully, this practice is only getting better as communication technology continues to evolve.
We can only enhance the system. And again, we're going to have, as communication improves, we're going to have video, virtual presence, augmented reality. This is what is coming.
You can find more information about Dr. Paulo Alves and all of our guests on our website, ingoodhealthpodcast.org. For more behind the scenes, follow In Good Health Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Greg Johnson.